Good morning, everybody. So good to see you this morning. Hope everyone's doing well. We are going to this week continue. If you remember last week, we looked at the lost sheep. So this week we're going to continue looking at the lost coin. But let's go ahead and let's start out with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for allowing us to come here with the good weather and the sunshine, and being able to come here today so that way we can really dive into your word and understand your teachings and be able to praise you and just love you and continue to grow faithfully through you. I ask that you be with those that are here today as well as those that couldn't make it, whether they have health things going on or just that they weren't able to make it today. Just be with them, that you may touch their hearts and their mind, that they may be at ease, knowing that you're there with them, and that you're here with us despite everything that's going on around us, that we can continue to grow faithfully through you, and that through you all good things happen and all things happen for a reason. I ask that, again, you continue to be with us, to have open minds, open hearts, so that way we may better understand your calling for us, and that we can continue to grow. I ask these things in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So last week was the lost sheep. Who remembers what we talked about? Anyone want to give a synopsis? Does anyone remember kind of what the general takeaway was last week? I will say, remember, the author's takeaway was love is more important than the wedding ring. Does anyone remember any of those themes or ideas that we really talked about last week by chance?
Those of you that were here.
So remember the parable from last week, and then the one we're looking at today, and then next week when we get into the parable of the lost son. Remember, all three of those are parables. It tells us that says the three parables in Luke 15 should be read together. All three are Jesus' response to the complaint by Israel's religious elite that he associated with people they despised. So if we remember last week, the parable of the lost sheep, there was basically, I think it was herd of sheep. There's a bunch of sheep, 100 sheep. One of them goes lost. The shepherd leaves the 99 and goes to find the lost one. Upon finding the lost one, throws it on his shoulders, carries him back to safety, and then turns to his friends and says, "Rejoice." It says, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." And one of the things that I had pointed out last week is that I really liked about this parable, and then even the one we're going to look at today, was that ideas. A lot of the parables we've looked at is the idea that we were looking at those people that maybe not seen as worthy, like those like the sinners, the poor, those that lived on the street and stuff like that, and a lot of the other parables, and how they actually were worthy. And in this one we see an instance where someone was part originally of the herd, left, and has now come back and been saved again. So it kind of gives you another aspect of that, of if you were a believer when you were younger and then you walked away and then you come back, you still get rejoice and you still have that love going on for you. It ended with, "I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance." So today, when we get into the lost coin, kind of a similar scenario, a little bit different, but these two kind of go hand in hand. And again, what we look at next week goes with it. And again, remember, this is all coming back because the Pharisees were at the time were really critical of Jesus because the Pharisees had certain kind of rules, expectations of things you do, and Jesus kind of went completely against those. He was going out and talking to non-believers. He was going out and talking to the sick and the poor and stuff like that, where the Pharisees saw that as something you didn't really do. Remember, we talked in the parable a couple of weeks ago, the idea when he's basically kind of having dinner with and the Pharisees are trying to kind of trip him up, and he said the idea of, well, on the Sabbath, are you not supposed to help a man in need? You go out, and if your calf falls in a ditch, you're willing to help your calf, and that's okay, but you think it's sinful to help a man who's sick or in need on the Sabbath. And so countless times we see these responses from Jesus, just kind of talking about the idea of going out and helping other people and be willing to help those sinners, and not just worrying about focusing on, in this case, when it's talking about the 99 just persons. So not just worrying about the believers and the people that are kind of in your circle and stuff like that, going out and finding those people that need to be saved. So before we get into, does anyone have anyone recall anything from last week that they wanted to share? If not, it's all good. We can jump into it. No? Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and we'll read the parable of the lost coin. We are in Luke chapter 15, and it's verses 8 through 10. So Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10. So again, this is the kind of, before we read that, again, it's the start of these three. It said, then all the tax collectors, so this is back to 15:1. Then all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. So he spoke this parable to them, saying, so this is the second parable in 3 that he is responding to the Pharisees. Responding to the Pharisees when they're complaining that he's eating with sinners or receives sinners and eating with them. So Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10, the parable of the lost coin. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost. Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So we see here a woman's got 10 coins, loses one. She goes searching for it. Kind of similar to the shepherd with the sheep. He loses a sheep, goes searching for it, saves it, says, hey, rejoice. In both instances here, we see how it says there's a joy over the one sinner who repents. Does anyone have any initial thoughts after they read this? Initial thoughts.
We, in our women's group, when we were talking about things, we really had to put ourselves in the perspective of then versus now. So some things in these days, it's hard to wrap your head around and it makes sense. Like, one coin, she's going to call. But, if you can put yourself in, then, and how things were way different than they are here now, it makes it a little easier to understand the importance of that one coin.
Yeah, and we'll see when we dive into the book, kind of the explanation a little bit too. When we're talking about one coin here, that is referencing one day's wage from that time. So if you want to relate to it to today, think about all of a sudden, let's say you got, I'm trying to think of a good way to do it, but let's say you got paid daily or whatever, and you've got your money in your wallet, and then all of a sudden it just falls out of your wallet, and a whole day's work, pay, gone. It's kind of equivalent to that. So as opposed to just thinking like, oh, I've dropped a quarter, like no, this is a whole day's wage that this woman has lost, and she's going looking for it. So yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Think about that. I mean, we kind of talked about that a couple weeks ago too. Like we take for granted a lot of things, like the idea of people walking. Like when we hear all these stories of the people walking to different cities and stuff like that, we take that for granted because I can drive up to Fairfield in like 15 minutes, where if we were walking, well, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes,
That's why I'm
whatever.
always late.
I was just trying to think. But anyways, we can get somewhere within 30 minutes that if we were walking, it would take us hours and stuff like that. So it's a really good point. Any other thoughts? All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our book then and see what he has to say about this. So we are on page 173. Page 173. Does anyone want to read Not a Shepherd but a Woman?
I'll do it.
All right.
With a few differences in the storyline, the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin make the same point. In contrast to the woman who searches for a lost coin, the shepherd is a man. The shepherd leaves behind 99 sheep to find one lost sheep, possibly putting the 99 at risk to search for the lost coin. The woman does not put the 9 at risk. The shepherd searches for the lost sheep without any special equipment. The woman uses a lamp and a broom. Both the sheep and the coin are passive in the story. These and other details are interesting but do not have any special meaning. Jesus' purpose is to refute the objections of the Pharisees and scribes about his eating with those they despised. In contrast to their hypocritical and harsh condemnation of sinners, Jesus emphasizes the love of God for the lost.
Yeah, so I think that last line was huge there. Like these two parables that we're reading, again, it says Jesus emphasizes the love of God for the lost. So that idea here, you've got two scenarios where there's something that's been lost and it's been found, and then in both scenarios, when it was found, it talks about rejoicing. One first with the friends, and then talking about, well, it's not only rejoicing with our friends, because in heaven, God and the angels, and the second one it says, joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So that idea of we need to be looking for the lost, because when the lost are found, there's great things that are happening. There's great rejoice in heaven and stuff like that. I know. I think it was last week. I had shared the idea of like how God moves through us, and the idea of like when we're thinking joy and rejoice and stuff, like the amount of emotions that kind of came over me, like when Luke and Lily like turn their lives over and stuff like that, and then even the idea of like they've asked their cousin to come, and it was a pleasant surprise when she reached out yesterday saying she really wanted to come back this week because she liked to hear as opposed to where she was going and stuff like that, she liked to hear and she wanted to come back, and just that joy and stuff that they get to have, one, that they get to have coming and stuff, and then the enjoyment they have, but then two, how like my heart, my parents' hearts have been filled and the rejoice we have, and let alone what's going on upstairs in heaven and stuff like that. That rejoice is just an amazing thing. Any other thoughts that people have about what we just read with the idea of the not a shepherd but a woman? I think it's interesting too. I mean, because it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it talks about does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it. Like when it mentions the idea of how in the first one there weren't tools used, and the second one there were tools. I kind of was thinking about that and took that idea of like not every scenario we have when we go out and we're trying to talk or deal with someone who's lost and stuff like that is going to be the same. Sometimes maybe just talking to them. Sometimes you might need helpful tools, whatever that is, if it's another friend whatever the case may be, but not all the scenarios are the same. But in the end, if they repent and turn their lives over and stuff like that, the joy and that response is going to be the same, the joy in heaven and stuff. So, any other thoughts? All right, well, let's go ahead and continue on our reading. A lost coin. The parable is straightforward, though the actions of the woman might be considered somewhat ridiculous. A woman had 10 silver coins and she lost one. The Greek text identifies the coins as drachma. A drachma was the wage for a day worker. It would not be of much value in today's currency, but it was perhaps important to the woman for her livelihood. Or it might have been part of her dowry, in which case it might have been somewhat equivalent to the wedding ring my wife lost. Using a lamp and a broom, she searches diligently until she finds it. As in the parable of the lost sheep, she invites her friends and neighbors to rejoice with her. Jesus concludes with the point of application. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Luke 15:10. The reference of angels of God is an indirect way of showing a high regard for God and avoiding offending Jews who were reluctant to use God's name. Even the angels rejoice when one sinner repents. In interpreting the parables, Craig Bloomberg suggests a third point in addition to the diligent search and rejoicing in recovering what was lost. He writes, just as the existence of the 99 sheep and 9 coins afford no excuse for not searching for what is lost, those who profess to be God's people can never be satisfied that their numbers are sufficiently great so as to stop trying to save more. And I think, that last part there, huge point. I think in today's world, and I know there's been plenty of times where I've kind of felt it, but we get content kind of with what we have, and we're like, oh, things are okay, I'm feeling comfortable right now, why go out and kind of really try and mess things up? Because when you go out and you're trying to help, a lot of times you get a lot more questions of, well, can you help me with this? Can you help me do this? Whether it's time, money, whatever the case may be, then all of a sudden, whoa, you're messing with my comfort zone here. Like, I don't know about this. But it tells us it's one of those things, like, we can't be content with what's going on. We can't be content with the amount of people that are saved. We can't be content with just everything that's going on. There's so much work that can be done. If we think back to a couple parables ago, we were talking about the vineyard and stuff, and the owner going out and constantly getting new workers and stuff like that, because there was enough work to go around, and then some. They weren't even done after that. Like, they didn't get there was always more work that can be done. So the idea of, I can be content because I have 9 out of my 10 days of my paycheck or whatever, however you want to reference it. I've got my 99 sheep. Why worry about the one? Well, we need to go out and find that one. We can't be content with it. Until everyone is saved, we can't be content. We need to keep going, and we need to keep trying. Does anyone have a thought that's popped into their head? Any ideas? Anything that might be conflicting you, or thing you liked about either of these parables, or what we've been talking about? You've got to look like you've...
He just looked at me. I was wondering.
Okay. No? All right.
Well,
Well, look.
I should have something, but I don't.
Okay, so here's a question, and I'll give you a second to think about it, and then we'll see what responses we get. So, how does this parable of the lost coin challenge us to make the lost a priority in our lives and the mission of the church? So how does this challenge us to make the lost a priority in our lives? What are our thoughts? I know I got my views, but I See what you guys think before I start saying that stuff. Bueller? Bueller? No? Well, I know for me, I mean, I kind of said it a minute ago. It's that idea of there are so many times where we can feel kind of content with what we have. We especially if we think about it as a church and stuff like that, it's one of those things we're constantly striving to do better and get more people in here and do more things and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's one of those like we could easily fall into like a little rut or whatever where we're like, you know what, I like the group of people we have, like why risk bringing someone else in, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, because I've always thought of that like with like even if I'm just thinking of friends and stuff like that, like when a new person comes in, it can change the entire dynamic of like a friend group. And it could potentially do the same thing for the church and stuff like that. But at the same time, it can do very powerful things too, not just negative. I think a lot of times we think of, or at least I do, I think of the negative things that can happen, not the positives, right? So the idea of, if you just think of a couple things, like, I'm not trying to like say it boastfully or anything, but it's just the one thing that's popped in my head. Like the idea of like when my dad came back, and then I started coming back, and then I got involved in some stuff, and now us as a church, we're looking at trying to get more involved in some of those things. It's one of those things our church is growing. We're doing different events coming up, like the trunk or treat and trying to have like a fall festival and stuff like that. We're trying to do things to not only, like in my head, because that's where I try, it's not only just to try and grow, but it's to be there for other people and be there for the community and be there for people. Sure, it would be amazing to have hundreds of people come flooding back and stuff like that, but it's more about going out and feeling it in your heart to be there for the community and stuff like that and doing those things. So one person can just kind of change a thing exponentially in an amazing way.
I just keep putting it in perspective, like say the 99 sheep were 99 people in this church,
Yeah.
that I was as close, or 100 people in this church that I was as close to as I am with this group here. And one of those people for some reason stopped coming. You know, how important it would be to go, you know, and bring them back. You know?
Yeah.
So because it would be in that scenario based on my love and my care for that person, but if you put it in the greater scheme of God's love and care for his people, then you can kind of feel it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I like that view of it. Any other thoughts? All right. We'll go with another question.
Aren't you just ready with the questions?
Well, I mean, it's getting us talking a little bit, sort of.
I like it.
All right, so I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what is the point about the value of people and the woman's diligent effort to find a coin of modest value? So what is the point about the value of people and the woman's diligent effort to find a coin of modest value? So how can we relate her diligent effort to finding this coin to the value of people? Because we've been relating this parable to the idea of finding lost people, right? So instead of a coin, finding a lost person. So how is the woman's diligent effort trying to find that coin? How is that related? Yeah.
I don't know how it connects, and maybe it doesn't, but what keeps sticking out in my head is that she called people to celebrate with her
Okay.
when she found it.
Yeah.
And that would seem odd, you know, to celebrate that, you know, I found. She didn't ask people to help her look,
Yeah.
but she called people to celebrate when she found it.
Yeah, so there's that. And I think the other thing for me is, I mean, it talks about the idea, and he talked about how she used tools to find that coin, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, I just look around, like she was sweeping, she had like a lamp. I mean, it's one of those, she was almost, I mean, it doesn't really say go to every length, but I mean, it does say search carefully until she finds it. So it was one of those things. She was carefully looking. She was being very diligent. She was looking purposefully and stuff like that for a coin. And if we relate that to a person and stuff like that, if the value of a coin, and she's being so diligent looking for that coin and stuff like that, and really taking all this effort and basically searching until she found it. It was the idea that she wasn't going to stop until she found this coin. So if we can relate that to a person and stuff like that, like, are we willing to go to any lengths and continue until we help save people and help save someone and stuff like that? Then that value must be, there must be high value there. Also, that idea of the rejoicing and stuff like that, like, if you think about it, like, I don't necessarily personally, like, I'm out celebrating and, like, super happy when it's a rainy day, right? Like, I don't think there's value to rain, it helps things grow and stuff. But just if it's one of those things, if it's storming out, I'm like, woo! But it's one of those things, like, if it's a nice sunny day, there's some cheer and joy in it and stuff like that. There's value in that, like, in some people's eyes. So the fact that they're rejoicing over a coin, if you're rejoicing, whether it's heaven or here down on earth and stuff like that, there must be some sort of value there. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it parallels the importance of how important each person is to God, because
Exactly.
they're not looking for many sheep. They're not looking for a bunch of coins. It's, specific. And he's not saying go save one person and, and that's it. But he's emphasizing the importance of each and every person.
Yeah, exactly.
For his love.
Yeah, and I think that relates back to that parable with the vineyard and stuff like that, when he had his original workers who had a set wage. Then he went out a couple hours later, brought people in. A couple hours later, brought people in. A couple hours later, brought people in. And then at the end of the day, they all got paid the same. Because they all had the same work. They all had the same, because of their work and what they did. It's like they're all still have the same love in the eyes of God, regardless of if they worked the full day or if it was just the last hour or two. So just like the last, every individual person has value, whether they've been lost, whether they've left and came back, whether they've never been a believer, whether they've been a believer their whole life, whatever. Everyone has that same value in the eyes of God. Any other thoughts?
I'll go.
Okay.
Only because
There we go.
you guys probably know where I'm headed with this. I look at it as for us with Mason and his disabilities and what can he comprehend and what he can't comprehend, and how we don't give up on him. He goes in there, he listens, he can't read, he can barely communicate, but he can answer Paul. So Paul never gave up on him. We've never gave up on him. He came here, and his dad, he knows his dad doesn't do church. But when he asked his dad to come, it was just like, okay, we have to do it, we can't. So we never gave up on him, and he's not the lost one. Even though he doesn't comprehend a lot, he comprehends more than we know, because he can't verbalize it to us. But he understands. He tries to look up when you were up there at church. He gets his little Bible and he's like, where are we at, Mom? Come help me find my page. But just not giving up, even though he has a disability, is what I'm getting out of it. Because a lot of people wouldn't give him 2 seconds of, it's like, really, what can you understand? You can't even communicate.
Yeah.
But 10 to 1, I bet if you ask him what he learned today, he'll probably be able to answer you. Now, don't ask him a couple days later, because that's a little iffy. But he retains what he needs to retain, and not giving up on him is the best that any of us can do, and we can learn from that. So that's what I'm getting at.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's one of those. Just the idea of everybody we need to be willing to help and give a chance and stuff like that, regardless of whether it's you're out and you look at somebody and you're like, oh, I don't know about that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. They're wearing ratty clothes and they're dragging a cart or whatever the case may be. Like, we can't just go out and be like, oh, that person's a well-dressed person. They probably will. Like, we have to be willing to go out and try and save anybody and everybody, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Talk to anybody and everybody. Help anybody and everybody.
We gotta take care of Mason, you know, with what he needs to know, and more in his heart than will come out his mouth, I'm sure. You know, and I mean, God will use him.
Oh yeah, he
You know?
has. God's used him because he'll tell anybody wherever we're at. You want to come to church? We're having this event. You want to come to my church? We're having this event. Especially if we're buying things for the event. You want to come? Mom, you got the flyer? I got the flyer. I'll go get the flyer. So, oh yeah, he keeps me on my toes about making sure people are invited to anything and everything. He already wants to invite a couple co-workers from his dad's work to come to the festival and stuff like that. So he's all about, that's what he does. Even though he can't communicate a lot, that's the way he can communicate. He can get that short of a sentence out. Do you want to come to my church?
It's amazing. I mean, yeah, just that openness and willingness to
Yeah,
share the
he's
love
very
of God and stuff like that. Yeah.
And you know, it's amazing. So this is kind of similar, not really, but when we go to the nursing homes, it's always the memory care units with dementia. And you have to get them down there and so you talk to them, and they think you're taking them to the bus to meet, or their kids are coming to take them home. You know, they're just everywhere. But so many times, like, they don't know who you are or where they are. But as soon as you start singing those songs, they sing
Yeah.
every word
Yeah.
and they remember them.
Yep.
And then you push them back and you're back to the same scenarios you were before. So it just kind of amazes me that God's ability.
Well, it's like I'm also like, you can't really communicate in sentences, right? But we listen to 93.3 all the time. That's our channel in my car at least. But if it's a song he knows, that boy's blurting it out. And then it's like in church when we sing them, his little eyes will light up like, ooh, I know this one. And then he'll start, you'll hear him a little bit more. Only because, he can't figure out how to read where we're at. But if he knows it because he's heard it on the gospel channel that we listen to, his eyes just light up like, oh, I can sing this one. I know this one. So.
Well, the other thing, and I don't know why this was kind of running through my head about this and stuff, like the idea too, if we think about our lives kind of growing up, and I was actually kind of thinking about this like a little bit yesterday too, and when it popped into my head today. So that life group I'm part of, there's always some kids and stuff around and some babies and stuff, and all of a sudden, like yesterday, like I turned to one of the guys because his daughter was there. I'm like, just the innocence of a child. And she was spinning around and had a cookie. I was like, cookie. And just now I'm sitting there thinking, like, just the innocence of a child and like where like our minds have gone to where, like, I mean, think back to when you were a kid and stuff like that. And let's say you went to a playground. You were willing to probably play with any kid on that playground, right? Go out and talk to anybody. And just over time and over life, just, I don't know, our views possibly maybe sort of change and stuff. I know I've always kind of tried to seclude myself and protect myself, and realized more recently that I need to be willing to open up and go out and talk to people that might not normally be comfortable talking to and stuff, because you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, any other thoughts before we close this up? All right, so I'll leave you with this, the memory verse for the two parables. But let the godly rejoice, let them be glad in God's presence, let them be filled with joy. Psalm 68:3. So again, it's one of those things, we continue to grow faithfully, we continue to try and get out there in the world and share God's love for people, whether it's through your actions, talking to people, whatever. Just just it's one of those things, continue to grow, and I think we can do amazing things. And really, when I say we can do amazing things, it's God doing amazing things through us. So, with that, I think that'll end it. Let's go ahead and praise the Lord.